50 years of living. That is the smell of my life, wood polish and old linen, the faint, sweet ghost of my wife's rose sachets. I am David, 83 years young, I tell anyone who asks. I still mow my own lawn, thank you, even if the doctor tells me to slow down. The house is paid for. The yard is immaculate. This is my fortress. But fortresses, I have learned, are only as strong as the people you trust to guard the gate. My gatekeeper lately has become my daughter, Clara. Clara is 35. She is sharp, efficient, and convinced that I am incapable of existing without her supervision. The supervision started subtly. She insisted on handling the bills. Then she took my spare set of car keys. Then she demanded the passwords to my bank accounts. "It is just easier, Dad," she would say, her voice high and soothing, the way you speak to a child who has hurt himself. "In case of emergency." I never liked the sound of that phrase. In case of emergency. It sounded less like a safeguard and more like a deadline. The real emergency, I knew, was that I was blocking her access to the greatest asset in her future, this house. This house is worth a fortune now. It is too big for me. Clara reminds me constantly. It is too much to manage. I tell her I manage it just fine. I tell her I don't plan on moving. She smiles that tight, thin smile that tells me she is filing my statements away as evidence against me. The betrayal always happens over food, doesn't it? When the family's gathered, when the veneer of normalcy is thickest. It was Sunday lunch. We were celebrating my grandson's graduation, a wonderful young man, mostly oblivious to the tension that hung like smoke between Clara and me. Clara was buzzing around the dining room, moving chairs I didn't want moved, straightening paintings that weren't crooked. She was playing the perfect hostess in a house she did not own. I watched her from my armchair. It felt like watching a trespasser casing the joint. After dessert, when my grandson went out back to toss a football, Clara sat down across from me. Her husband, Gary, perched nervously beside her, trying to look supportive while avoiding my eyes. She didn't start with the house this time. She started with my brain. "Dad?" she began, the concern in her voice sounding practiced, like a line she rehearsed in the car. "We need to talk about your memory." I felt the familiar chill. I hate this game. "My memory is excellent, Clara," I said calmly. "I remember you need new tires for the SUV." She ignored the jab. "The little things, Dad. You misplaced your reading glasses 3 times this morning. You forgot the date of Dr. Evans's appointment." "I moved it. I called the office." "But you didn't tell me," she stressed the final word, making my decision an act of incompetence. "You're making executive decisions about your health without consulting your primary caregiver." I was not in a hospital. I was in my chair. "I am my primary caregiver, Clara." She leaned forward, dropping the facade of gentle concern. Her voice tightened, becoming steel. "No, Dad, you're not. Legally, we are approaching a point where the court will disagree. We talked to an elder care consultant last week. They agree it's time to be proactive." Gary cleared his throat loudly. "Proactive about what?" I asked, keeping my voice level, though inside the alarm bells were deafening. Clara reached into her handbag and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick. "Proactive about your future safety," she said. She slid the envelope onto the coffee table between us. "This is paperwork for a power of attorney and a partial deed transfer." My hands felt suddenly cold. Partial deed transfer. A slice of my house, demanded as tribute for my continued freedom. "This gives us the legal authority to manage your affairs," she continued, speaking quickly now, rushing past the difficult truths. "If we have this, we can ensure you are safe, comfortable, and taken care of." "Taken care of where?" I asked. She sighed, irritated by my slowness. "Here, ideally. But we have to be realistic, Dad. This house has stairs. You're 83. The upkeep is enormous. We can't be here 24 hours a day." She looked straight at me then. The look was calculating, devoid of daughterly warmth. "If you sign this power of attorney and the deed transfer, we can stabilize things. We can hire private care, bring people in. And if I don't sign this?" The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Gary shifted uncomfortably, pulling at his collar. Clara smiled again, but it was a cold, cruel expression now. The mask was completely off. If you don't sign this, Dad, we have to look at options that ensure your safety legally. The consultant was very clear. If you are deemed incapable of managing your own safety and assets, but refuse to cooperate with family management, the state will step in. She paused, letting the words sink into the silence. That usually means institutionalization, Dad. The judge doesn't mess around when assets are tied up and the elder is at risk. We would be forced to petition the court to place you in a facility, and then the legal battle over the house starts anyway. It will be messy, expensive, and you will lose your dignity completely. Institutionalization. The word hit me harder than a physical blow. A sterile room, set schedules, forced medication, being stored away like obsolete furniture, until the will finally read how she wanted it to read. You would put your own father in a home? I asked quietly. I would ensure my father is safe and managed. She corrected me sharply. It is my duty to ensure your assets aren't wasted before we have to pay for your long-term care anyway. She saw me not as a father, but as a dwindling portfolio. The sheer audacity, the cold, calculated threat of it, stopped my heart for a beat. I felt the slow burn of deep, abiding fury. I looked down at the envelope resting on the expensive walnut table. It contained the blueprints for my prison. I see, I said simply. My voice was rough, dry. I picked up the envelope, examining the heavy paper. I did not look at her. Just read through it, Dad. We can sign tomorrow afternoon, she pressed, believing she had won, believing the fear was enough. She stood up, gathering her purse. I have to run. I left your prescription refills on the kitchen counter. Don't forget them. As she walked toward the door, she gave Gary a look that clearly communicated, job done. The moment the front door closed, I felt the silence rush in, heavy and suffocating. Gary stayed behind, wringing his hands. He was weak, harmless, but complicit by marriage. David, Gary mumbled, she just wants to protect you. The laws are complicated. I looked at the meek man who married my vicious daughter. Gary, I said, I need you to do something for me. He looked surprised. What is it? I need you to drive your car down to the hardware store, buy 3 gallons of exterior paint, get the shade called Cloud White. It's in aisle 3. Gary frowned. Now? It's Sunday evening. Now. And don't tell Clara where you went. I need time alone in my own house. Gary, perhaps sensing the danger in disobeying a man who had just been threatened with incarceration, nodded quickly and scurried out the side door. I was alone. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my years, but also the weight of an iron resolve I hadn't known I still possessed. 50 years in this house. 50 years working, raising a family, saving. It was mine, my legacy, my shelter. Clara saw it as a bank vault she intended to crack open early. Institutionalization was her weapon. It was swift, cruel, and nearly impossible to fight once the paperwork was filed. If I didn't act immediately, she would have me locked down before the judge even looked at my finances. She thought her paperwork was the only document that mattered. She thought she held all the power. She had made 2 fatal mistakes. She underestimated my mind, and she threatened my freedom. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the phone hanging on the wall. It was an old rotary phone, heavy black plastic. I preferred it. It felt solid, reliable. I pulled out my old address book, bound in scarred leather, tucked away behind the cookbooks. I flipped past the numbers for the grocery store and the dentist. I found the name, Robert Bob Vance. Bob was not just my attorney, he was my friend. We played poker together every Friday for 30 years, until his knees gave out. Bob specialized in expedited estate management and asset protection for families dealing with high conflict situations. He was a shark, but a loyal shark. I lifted the heavy receiver. The silence of the house pressed in around me. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Sunday. He would probably be sitting down to dinner. Ivy dialed his private line. Bob answered on the second ring, his voice gruff. Vance. Bob, it's David. David, what's wrong? You sound like you just saw a ghost. Worse than a ghost, Bob. I just saw my own daughter. She gave me two choices: sign over the deed or go into the nursing home. Bob didn't need any more details than that. He knew the drill. There was a heavy pause on the line. Then Bob's voice lowered, becoming professional and sharp. When does she expect you to sign? Tomorrow afternoon. She thinks she has secured my compliance through fear. We move faster than fear, David. We move now. I need that deed protected tonight, Bob. I need it transferred immediately. I need her to wake up tomorrow morning, ready to execute her hostile takeover, and find she has nothing to take over. It's a Sunday, David. This is difficult, but not impossible. We need to do a temporary transfer, a gift deed, and arrange the counter paperwork immediately. Do you have a trusted beneficiary who is not Clara? I knew exactly who. The only person in my family who had never asked for a penny, and who had always respected my autonomy. Yes, my grandson, Michael. He just graduated. He needs the security, and he has earned my respect. Excellent. You need to come down here. My office is locked, but I can meet you there within the hour. Bring the existing deed, your ID, and anything related to the property tax records. We are doing this before dawn. I'll be there in 40 minutes, I promised. I hung up the phone. I stood there for a moment, looking around the house, feeling the deep ache of having to fight my own blood for the right to remain free within my walls. Clara thought she had closed the game. She thought she had used the ultimate threat to corner the old man. She would learn tonight that the old man was still very much capable of moving the entire board. I walked to the safe hidden in the back of my study closet. I retrieved the deed, the thick parchment, fragile with age. I had 40 minutes until I met Bob Vance. 40 minutes to sign away the house to someone who deserved it. 40 minutes to set the trap. The fear was gone now. Only the cold, silent determination remained. Tomorrow afternoon, Clara would arrive, pen ready, to claim her inheritance. She expected me to crumble. She would be disappointed. I stepped into the hallway, leaving the quiet house behind me, ready to execute the legal maneuver that would change everything. The call was made. The movement had begun. The morning would bring justice. But first, I had a very long night of paperwork ahead of me. The silence after Clara left was thicker than the fog that usually hugged the estuary. I sat in my armchair, the old leather groaning slightly beneath my weight. This was the same chair where Eleanor used to read to me, her voice a low, comforting hum in the evenings. Now, only silence remained, weighted down by Clara's casual cruelty. It wasn't just the words, "the home," that chilled me. It was the absolute lack of warmth, the surgical precision of the threat. She knew exactly what would break me. She knew my greatest fear was being stripped of my dignity and left in a sterile, white room full of strangers. I am 83. I am forgetful sometimes, yes, but I'm not senile. I can tie my shoes, pay my bills, and crucially, I can still remember every lie she told me, every promise she broke. I remember teaching her to ride her bicycle right there in the driveway she now wanted paved over and listed on the market for an aggressive price. The house was not just bricks and mortar. It was the museum of my life with Eleanor. If I allowed Clara to steal it through intimidation, I would be erasing Eleanor's last physical fingerprint on this world. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, a sensation far deeper than the draft from the old window frame. It was the coldness of absolute resolve. Fear was retreating, replaced by a quiet, calculating fury. The next morning the control was tighter than ever. Clara called twice before 10 o'clock. "Just checking you took your medication, Dad." She didn't care about my health. She was checking my compliance. When she stopped by for her brief, obligatory afternoon visit, I watched her movements. She moved through the rooms like a landlord preparing an eviction notice. She wasn't looking at the family photos. She was estimating the cost of patching the plaster. I noticed something was missing later that day. My checkbook. The one I kept in the top drawer of my mahogany desk, where it had lived, untouched, for 40 years. I searched. It was gone. I found it finally, tucked under a heavy, dusty book of Victorian poetry. A book she knew I never read. A childish, blatant maneuver, designed specifically to remind me that she was in charge of my access. She controlled the paper, therefore she controlled my power. I felt like a museum exhibit, dusted and preserved, but fundamentally owned. The worst humiliation came during dinner, the following night. She insisted on making my meal. A meal I was perfectly capable of preparing myself. She served me thin, bland soup in a chipped bowl. "I've pre-portioned all your meals for the week, Dad," she announced, stacking clear plastic containers in the refrigerator. "It's much easier this way. You don't need to worry about cooking." She took the small porcelain shaker of sea salt, the one Eleanor brought back from Venice 40 years ago, and dumped the contents into the sink. "Too much sodium," she said, dusting her hands. The doctor said. She didn't look at me. She treated the object, and my history with it, as if it were simply garbage. It wasn't the salt. It was the erasure, the casual disrespect of my memories, my preferences, my autonomy. That small act, the dissolving grains of salt, was the moment the switch flipped entirely. I went to bed early that night, but I didn't sleep. I had been waiting for the right moment to fight, hoping she would back down. Now I realized she never would. She smelled money and saw weakness. I thought about the call she had made last week, standing in the foyer, thinking I was asleep in my chair. "Yes, we need to price it aggressively," she'd murmured into the phone. "Dad is flexible now. Very flexible." Flexible. I was a willow branch she intended to snap. No, I would not fund her retirement with my humiliation. Around midnight, I eased out of bed, my joints protesting the movement. I wrapped Eleanor's thick blue cardigan around my shoulders. I went into the study Clara had deemed too dusty and had forbidden me from using, since she bought the new cream-colored rug. I knelt down, the floor cold beneath my knees, and pulled open the bottom drawer of the old filing cabinet. It was the drawer she never checked. Too low, too dark, too messy for her clinical gaze. Tucked beneath decades of tax receipts and canceled checks, I found what I needed. An old, brittle telephone address book, stained with coffee from the time Eleanor and I hosted Christmas in 1998. I ran my finger down the worn paper. I needed one name, Henry Walsh. Henry was more than my lawyer. He was my oldest fishing partner, a man who understood discretion and the value of old bonds. We hadn't talked business in 20 years, only trout and bad knees. I could not call him from the house line. Clara had insisted on connecting the house phone through a smart hub, which she claimed monitored for scams, but in reality monitored me. I returned to the bedroom closet and dug out the old shoebox. Inside, tucked beneath a pair of winter gloves I hadn't worn in years, was my prepaid cell phone, a burner phone I had bought years ago for a transatlantic trip and forgotten about. I plugged it in. The small screen glowed immediately. Charged. Thank God. I waited until 2 a.m. The house was utterly silent, the cold reaching into every corner. I heard the distant tick of the grandfather clock on the landing, marking time, marking the end of my patience. I walked softly to the kitchen, waiting for the sound of the refrigerator compressor to click off, masking the small sounds I was making. Then I dialed Henry. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the raw electric energy of finally seizing control. The line rang 3 times. "Walsh?" Henry answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Henry, it's Arthur. I apologize for the time. I need a favor, a monumental favor, right now." I didn't waste a second on pleasantries or social cushioning. I told him everything. The threat of the nursing home, the checkbook theft, the realtor calls, the bland soup and the crushed salt shaker. Henry didn't interrupt. He didn't offer sympathy. He simply listened, a trait I had always admired in him. When I finished, the silence stretched again. "Arthur," Henry finally said, his voice now crisp and awake. "You understand what you're asking. This isn't just rewriting a will. You're talking about an irrevocable, immediate transfer of your primary asset, the house." "I understand perfectly," I whispered into the darkness. "I want it to go where she can never touch it. I don't want a penny of my legacy to fund her maliciousness. I want it protected." Henry confirmed what I suspected. There was one mechanism: a rapid, irrevocable transfer to a specific charitable trust designed exactly for this kind of immediate protection against coercion. But it had to be airtight. It had to be done electronically, bypassing the traditional delays. It needed to be executed immediately, before the banks opened, before the working day began, and most importantly, before Clara woke up to check the morning news feeds or my financial statements. It will be the fight of her life if she contests this, Arthur, Henry warned. Are you certain? I am certain, Henry. I am certain I prefer a legal fight to quiet suffocation. He told me what he needed: the account numbers, the original digital deed scans, the encryption key for my signature vault. Everything necessary to make the legal transfer instantaneous and legally ironclad. All the documentation I had prepared years ago, waiting for the day I might need to protect Eleanor's legacy from the very person we created. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, a steady, triumphant drumbeat. The light outside the kitchen window was just starting to turn a pale, watery gray. Dawn was approaching. I had precious little time. Clara was sleeping soundly down the hall, blissfully unaware that her control and her inheritance was about to shatter. I moved quietly toward the filing cabinet again. The clock was ticking, and I needed to gather the documents before the sun rose. The fear was not a sudden burst of panic. It was a cold, thick blanket settling over me. Sarah's words echoed louder than the silence of the empty house. The facility. The doctors. The legal capacity review. She didn't just threaten my assets. She threatened my freedom. She threatened my last years of dignity. I knew she meant it. That casual, surgical tone when she spoke of separating me from my familiar things. It was the sound of a daughter calculating profit. I sat in my armchair for hours, the light fading outside the window. I tried to reason with the image of her face. Maybe she was just angry. Maybe it was an empty threat. But the cold certainty in my heart told me otherwise. Once you hand over control, you never get it back. Institutionalization is not care. It is control defined by legal paperwork. If I woke up tomorrow and she had started the paperwork, I would be fighting uphill, alone, discredited. I couldn't wait for Sunday lunch. I couldn't wait for the next call. I realized I had to use the last fragment of my control, and I had to use it now. Before dawn, before the sun rose, and gave her another day to manipulate the system. I got up slowly. My joints ached, but adrenaline was a strange painkiller. My hands were shaking as I reached for the old black phone, the one I kept in the dusty box in the attic, the one Sarah didn't know the number for. It was the only way to ensure the call wasn't monitored, logged, or overheard. I dialed Mr. Davis's private emergency line. He was the only lawyer I trusted, a man who understood the value of privacy and urgency. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Mr. Davis, it's George. George? Are you all right? It's 2 a.m. No, I am not all right. I need you to do the thing we discussed. The final step. The one about the deed. I need it done tonight. There was a long pause on the line. Mr. Davis knew exactly what I meant. We had prepared for this theoretical nightmare scenario for years. A final drastic measure. A trust designed to hold the house outside of my estate, outside of Sarah's reach. Tonight, George? That's aggressive timing. We need a notary, we need witnesses, and we need the registry open by morning. I need it before Sarah finds out I haven't signed the house over to her. She threatened to institutionalize me if I didn't comply. Tonight, Mr. Davis, my freedom depends on this. The word institutionalize cut through the sleepy static. It carried the weight of a physical threat. Understood, George. I will call the team. Can you meet me at my private office in an hour? I'll have the necessary documents ready for the immediate transfer and filing. We will register the new trust deed electronically immediately. This will be binding before sunrise. I hung up and felt a sliver of icy determination replace the panic. I dressed quickly in the dark, pulling on a heavy coat. I wrote a small, careful note and left it on the kitchen counter. Just a simple line about needing fresh air in case Sarah woke early. A lie of omission. The drive across the empty city was surreal. Streetlights threw long, cold shadows. This was not how I imagined using my independence, not sneaking around, feeling like a thief in my own life. Mr. Davis's office was quiet and discreet. 2 paralegals were already waiting, pale and efficient, nursing coffee. The documents were spread across the large mahogany table. They were clean, concise, and painfully final. The deed to the only property I had ever truly owned, the house where I raised my children, the place where Eleanor died, was being irrevocably moved. It wasn't going to a person, but to a defined entity, the Eleanor and George Dignity Trust. This trust specified that the house could be used for my maintenance and care, but could never be sold or controlled by any direct descendant who had attempted to undermine my well-being or legal capacity. It also named my distant, kind nephew, Thomas, as the backup administrator. Sarah was legally, finally, cut out. The leverage was gone. "You understand the implications of this, George?" Mr. Davis asked, his voice low. "Once we execute, this is permanent. She receives nothing from the primary asset upon your passing. It will be protected, but she will certainly discover this when she attempts to make her own moves." "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "She chose her path, Mr. Davis. She chose to prioritize control over compassion. She chose to trade my safety for her immediate inheritance. I am simply choosing dignity." I signed my name 6 times, large, slow, deliberate strokes. Each signature felt like closing a door. The door to my past expectations. The door to reconciliation. The notary witnessed the final signature, stamping the paper with a heavy, official thud. Mr. Davis took the final deed copy and turned to his computer. "The electronic filing is complete. The county registry has accepted the new deed transfer. The deed is officially recorded under the new trust name." He looked up at me. "It is 4:15 a.m., George. The house is safe. Your independence is protected." A wave of exhaustion washed over me, heavy and sudden. It was done. The most difficult legal decision of my entire life, made in the dark, driven by fear. I drove back home as the first pale sliver of orange light began to touch the horizon. The house looked exactly the same, but it felt different. It felt like mine again, truly mine. I walked quietly back inside, replacing the note I had left on the counter. Sarah was still asleep upstairs. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, heavy silence. The silence that follows a surgical operation. The cancer had been removed, but the recovery was going to be brutal. I poured myself a cup of old coffee and sat down, holding the sealed confirmation of the trust transfer. A heavy piece of paper that represented absolute freedom and absolute war. She would wake up soon. She would eventually discover the transfer. How long would it take her to realize her great threat was now meaningless, that the asset she relied on for control was already gone? I watched the sunrise, painting the kitchen window bright gold. I waited, and I knew the real test was only beginning. The storm was coming, and I was ready for the sound of her discovering that, before dawn, I had already won the first move. The morning was still dark, smelling of rain and the stale air of a house I no longer recognized as home. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for the lawyer's car. Everything was moving too fast, yet every second felt thick and slow, like honey pouring from a jar. I had barely slept. The decision was made in the frantic rush of fear, but now, facing the silence, it felt monstrous. Giving up the house, giving up the physical anchor of my life. I drank my coffee cold. I did not dare turn on the stove. Clara usually woke around 7, and I needed to be gone, the paperwork sealed, long before then. A discreet knock came precisely at 5:15 a.m. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, was exactly the kind of man I needed, quiet, efficient, and devoid of unnecessary emotion. He slipped in like a shadow. We sat in the living room, surrounded by the furniture I had saved for 30 years. My grandmother's lamp, the rug we bought on our honeymoon. Mr. Davies laid the documents on the ottoman. "Arthur," he whispered, his voice low and serious, "you understand the full implications. This is irreversible. Once signed, the house is legally detached from your estate. It belongs to the trust. I nodded, my throat tight. It's the only way, isn't it? It guarantees that no one, not even Clara, with a court order based on competency issues, can touch this property or use it to manipulate your care decisions. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I looked around one last time. Every corner held a memory of her, of Martha, my wife. This wasn't just a house. It was the museum of our life together. But museums are safe places. My home had become a weapon, aimed at my own head. I signed the first document, then the second. The sound of the pen scratching against the heavy paper echoed loudly in the pre-dawn quiet. It was done. The deed was transferred. The paperwork confirming the legal change was already being processed electronically, filed with the county registrar. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the house was no longer mine. Mr. Davies reviewed the papers, stacking them neatly. Congratulations, Arthur. You are officially free of your largest liability. Liability. That is what this beautiful house had become. A legal liability that made me vulnerable. He handed me a small envelope containing the temporary location where I would stay for the next few days. A quiet, secure, serviced apartment near the city center. Clara will react immediately when she finds out. Do not answer her calls, Arthur. Not yet. You need safety and distance for the first 48 hours. Let her spin in the void you just created. I nodded. I gathered the small, worn travel bag I had hidden in the coat closet the previous night. My medication, a few changes of clothes, Martha's old watch, and the photo album I couldn't bear to leave behind. I walked the perimeter of the living room, touching the cold wood of the mantelpiece. A final farewell, silent and profound. We slipped out the front door, closing it quietly behind us. The air outside was cold, sharp, and clean. It felt like the air of a new life. As we drove away, turning the corner onto the main street, I glanced back at the dark silhouette of the house. The windows were still blind. Clara was still asleep, dreaming of her control, unaware that the foundation of her power had just been pulled out from under her. We reached the temporary apartment just as the city began to stir. It was small, safe, and anonymous. Mr. Davies left me with strict instructions. Rest, eat, and wait. Wait for the storm. I sat in the strange, sterile living room, the city noise muffled by thick glass. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a raw, unfamiliar adrenaline. I had fought back. I had taken the only thing she valued and shielded it forever from her greedy reach. Around 9:30 a.m., the first text arrived. It was always a text first, establishing authority. Clara. Dad, did you take the trash out? And the plumber is coming today. Be sure to supervise him. The check is on the counter. I did not reply. I laid the phone face down. 10 minutes later, the text message tone sounded again. Clara. Dad? I need to know you got this. I need you to confirm. I looked at the phone. For the first time in years, the urge to comply, the ingrained habit of obedience, failed to surface. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. She had threatened to discard me. I had discarded the asset she craved. The calls started shortly thereafter. 1 missed call, 2 missed calls. They were urgent, demanding. She knew something was wrong. My silence was shattering her routine. Around 11:00 a.m., the intensity escalated. She must have come home, noticed the plumber's check still sitting on the counter, and realized I was physically gone. The house was empty. The voicemails began to pile up, her voice sharp, escalating from irritation to genuine panic. Dad, where are you? Are you sick? Why are you playing this game? Call me back right now. I swear if you've caused me to miss work for this nonsense. Then came the silence. A significant, terrifying gap of nearly 2 hours. I imagined her trying to call my friends, my relatives, anyone who might know where I was. But I had told no one except Mr. Davies. I knew exactly what she was doing in that long silence. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the money. She was worried about the house. She would have contacted the bank first, trying to see if I had made any large withdrawals. She would have found the accounts frozen, secured by Mr. Davies. Frustrated, she would have gone for the biggest target, the deed. She had her own lawyer, a cheaper one, but effective enough for paperwork. She would have called him, demanding he pull the county records. Then, the final desperate call came at 1:45 p.m. It wasn't a question. It was a roar of disbelief, recorded on my voicemail. "Arthur, you old fool. What did you do? What is this trust? The silver hand? I can't believe you would pull this stunt. Do you think this changes anything? You can run, but you cannot hide from me. I will find out where you are, and when I do, I will show that lawyer just how sick you really are. You hear me? You will regret this day. This house was mine." The recording ended abruptly with a sharp, choked sound, the sound of pure, unadulterated loss. I picked up the phone, looking at the screen. I saw the string of missed calls, the angry texts, the venomous voicemail. And I felt nothing but quiet, steady resolve. She had lost the anchor. She had lost the leverage. She had threatened the asylum. And in return, I had secured my dignity. The physical threat was gone, replaced by impotent rage. Mr. Davies called a few minutes later, anticipating the fallout. "She's burning up the line, Arthur. Her lawyer confirmed the transfer. She's demanding an immediate meeting to discuss financial reconciliation. She's trying to establish control again." I took a deep breath. The safety of the apartment suddenly felt insufficient. She knew I was safe, but she didn't know who I was with, or where I was going next. "Tell her I will not meet her," I instructed, my voice calm, almost emotionless. "Tell her that I will only communicate through you. And tell her this: the game changed before dawn. I am no longer her responsibility. I am simply the creditor, and she is late on her payments." I hung up, feeling the tremor in my hand finally subside. The battle for the house was over, but the battle for the rest of my life, the confrontation with the daughter who saw me only as a burden and an ATM, was just beginning. I was safe for now, but I had a long way to go before true, final justice was delivered. The next step was the hardest, facing her without fear, for the first time. The papers were heavy in the lawyer's briefcase. Mr. Davies was efficient, too efficient for 3 a.m. He had promised privacy. He had delivered speed. I watched him sign the last page. My signature felt strange. It wasn't just ink. It was freedom. The deed was transferred completely, effective immediately. The house was mine, but not in the way Sarah understood mine. It belonged to the irrevocable trust now, the Arthur Miller Trust. The threat was neutralized. Sarah's control vanished with the notary's stamp. Relief didn't flood me. It seeped in slowly, like cold water rising. It was absolute, chilling, and final. Mr. Davies packed up his things. He looked tired but respectful. He shook my hand firmly. "You did the right thing, Arthur. You protected your legacy." Legacy. I hadn't thought of it that way. I just wanted my dignity. He left before the first light touched the driveway. I didn't go back to bed. Sleep was impossible. I felt brittle and strangely buoyant. I made coffee, strong and black. The house was silent, a dangerous, expectant silence. I sat in the parlor, waiting for the day to begin, waiting for her. I rehearsed my words in my head. They needed to be quiet, unemotional, absolute. She arrived late, around 10. She never hurried unless money was involved. Her usual whirlwind entry. The keys tossed carelessly onto the kitchen counter. "Good morning, Dad. Did you remember to get those prescriptions filled? The important ones?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked straight to the fridge, grabbing a juice box she didn't pay for. "The plumber needs to be called today. That leaky faucet is driving me mad. I can't believe you haven't sorted it out yet." She was inventorying, as always. Checking the house, checking the list, checking me. I stayed seated in my chair, staring into the middle distance. "Sarah," I said. My voice was rough from disuse. She paused, juice box halfway to her lips. She hated being interrupted when she was giving orders. "What, Dad? I'm busy." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The truth was loud enough. I slowly pulled a heavy cream envelope from the inside pocket of my robe. It was sealed with the official stamp of the county recorder. I placed it on the small mahogany table between us. I pushed it gently toward her. "This came for you," I said. She frowned, annoyed by the formality. She picked it up grudgingly. "What is this, a tax bill?" She tore the paper impatiently. Her eyes scanned the official headings. Her expression didn't change at first. Then the comprehension hit her. It was like watching a switch flip from annoyance to pure, concentrated panic. Her hands started trembling. The cream paper rustled violently. She read the legal phrasing again, tracing the words with a shaky finger. "Transfer of deed, irrevocable trust, effective 4:15 a.m. The juice box dropped from her hand. It landed silently on the thick rug, staining the wool. Neither of us noticed the spill. She looked up at me. Her face was bloodless, chalk white. "What did you do?" she whispered. It was the quietest I'd ever heard her. It lasted only a second. Then the storm broke. "You old fool! What have you done?" She threw the papers back at me, scattering them across the polished floor. "You signed away the house? Our house? Did you lose your mind? Who put this ridiculous idea in your head? Who is this Davies character?" Her voice climbed in pitch, cracking with genuine shock and fury. Not parental worry. Financial loss. "This is theft. You can't just give away our inheritance." "It was never your inheritance, Sarah," I stated calmly. I stood up slowly, deliberately. This was the moment I had waited for. "It was my house, the roof over my head, my asset, which you treated as your personal bank account." She started pacing, pulling at her hair. "We had a plan. I was managing your finances. I told you, if you didn't cooperate, we'd have to look at options. Better options for your care, residential options." She couldn't bring herself to say the word asylum or nursing home now. It was too raw. "That's exactly why I did it," I told her. I walked over to the windows and looked out at the familiar garden, the one I tended every spring. "You held a threat over me, Sarah. You used my fear of being discarded to control every decision I made, every dollar I spent. I was protecting you. You're getting old, Dad. You're vulnerable. You need supervision." I needed respect. "And you offered me humiliation," I countered. I turned back to her. My gaze was steady. I was no longer the frail, intimidated father. I was the homeowner, the custodian of the trust. You asked for control, Sarah. You demanded cooperation. The consequence of not cooperating, you told me, was institutionalization, being locked away. She stared, speechless for once. I decided I would choose my own institution. I continued softly. I chose the Arthur Miller Trust. I transferred the house out of my personal name, beyond the reach of any court that might declare me incompetent and award control to you. Her chest was heaving. She looked like she might shatter the china cabinet. "This is spite, pure spite. You did this to hurt me?" "No," I corrected. "I did this to save myself, and to save the house from becoming collateral damage in your endless demands. It is safe now. No bank can touch it. No debt collector. No power of attorney can sell it." I looked down at the documents she had thrown. "The terms of the trust are clear. I live here until I die. The costs are covered. After that, the assets are dispersed equally to all beneficiaries, based on my will, which I updated last night." She gasped. "You updated the will? Without telling me?" "You lost the right to consultation when you started discussing mandatory care facilities," I said simply. She walked towards me, her hands clenching into fists. "You will reverse this. We will go to the lawyer right now. You are clearly not of sound mind. I will get a doctor's note. I will fight this in court. I will prove that Davies manipulated you." "You can try," I agreed. "But Mr. Davies is the most reputable elder law attorney in the state. He verified my cognitive state thoroughly. He understood the circumstances. He heard the threats." I held up one hand, halting her aggressive advance. "You have lost your key, Sarah. The locks are being changed this afternoon. If you wish to visit, you will call first. You will be polite. You will respect the boundaries of the trust." She sputtered, unable to form a coherent threat. All her power had evaporated into the cold morning air. "And under no circumstances," I finished, my voice iron hard, "will you ever mention money, assets, or institutional options again in my home. If you do, the visit will end immediately, and the trust holds the power to deny access to beneficiaries who pose a risk to the well-being of the primary occupant. She stood there, defeated, but radiating pure, poisonous hatred. The loss of the house was a financial earthquake for her. She snatched her keys, ignoring the stained rug. "You haven't heard the last of this, Arthur?" She spat, using my first name for the first time in years. "You think you won? This is just beginning." The sound of the front door slamming was deafening. It rattled the antique glass in the hallway. And then silence returned. I stood there for a long time, listening to the echoes fade. My chest hurt. I hadn't raised my voice, but I had used every reserve of emotional strength I had left. I was alone again, truly alone. The fight was won. The house was safe. My dignity was restored. But looking at the juice stain on the carpet, I knew she was right. This was just the start of the war. I had pushed back against a predator, and predators never give up their prey easily. I had to be ready for the legal battles ahead. I had to secure the final protective layers of the trust. I reached for the phone. I needed to call Mr. Davies back. The financial accounts needed to be moved. There was more work to be done before the true peace could settle, and I was determined to see it through. 50 years of living. That is the smell of my life. Wood polish and old linen. The faint, sweet ghost of my wife's rose sachets. I am David. 83 years young, I tell anyone who asks. I still mow my own lawn, thank you.